Right now, the most downloaded app in the United States is one that most Americans couldn't describe in a single sentence. It's not Apple, not Google, not Amazon. It's made by a company called PDD Holdings, and in a single year, more than 1.3 billion packages entered the United States duty-free, the vast majority from Chinese factories. No tariff, no customs duty, no import inspection of any kind. Nobody voted for this. The products are cheap, sometimes embarrassingly cheap. A phone case for $2, a set of kitchen knives for $7, a garden hose that works fine and costs less than a latte. That's what everyone saw, cheap stuff from China. What nobody saw was the machine underneath. Behind every $7 purchase was a supply chain architecture so precise, so vertically integrated, and so deliberately invisible that it made every layer of Western retail suddenly look like expensive overhead. This is the story of Temu, and of the man who built it. Not to be praised, not to be featured on magazine covers, but to be impossible to stop. His name is Colin Huang, and by the time the world understood what he had made, the invasion was already complete. To understand what Huang built, you need to understand what he noticed first. In 2015, China's e-commerce market was owned by two companies, Alibaba on one side, JD.com on the other, both competing for the same customer, the relatively affluent urban consumer in China's first-tier cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen. What they missed was everyone else, China's lower-tier cities, its rural provinces, the hundreds of millions of people who wanted to buy things online but still found even Alibaba's prices out of reach. Jack Ma would later admit publicly that he had not thought deeply enough about the people living on the margins, the roughly 600 million Chinese citizens earning around $140 a month. Huang saw the gap. He'd spent years at Google before returning to China, studying how large platforms aggregate demand, how algorithms connect buyers and sellers at scale. He believed that if you could aggregate purchasing intent before a factory even ran a production cycle, you could give manufacturers the volume certainty they needed to drop prices dramatically. He called his vision Costco meets Disneyland. Ultra-low prices like Costco, but shopping as entertainment, social, gamified, shareable, viral, like a theme park you carried in your pocket. On April 20th, 2015, he incorporated Pinduoduo in Shanghai with early seed funding from Chinese venture firms. The platform's early focus was almost quaint: fresh produce, small farmers, agricultural goods sold direct from grower to urban consumer. Within 18 months, Tencent was paying close attention. In July 2016, it led a $110 million Series B round, giving Pinduoduo direct access to WeChat's hundreds of millions of users as its distribution engine. 3 years later, in July 2018, Pinduoduo listed on the Nasdaq. It raised approximately $1.6 billion at IPO. Huang held roughly 47% of the company, one of the largest private ownership stakes in Chinese technology at the time. 3 years old, $1.5 billion at IPO, and almost nobody outside China had heard of it. That was not an accident. But there was a problem visible to anyone who actually used the platform. Pinduoduo was drowning in fakes, counterfeit luxury goods, electronics that didn't function, pesticides mislabeled as fertilizers, vitamins with no active ingredients. By 2018 and 2019, the platform had a reputation crisis severe enough that China's State Administration for Market Regulation was issuing fines. Alibaba and JD.com were openly mocking it. International brands refused to list. Consumer groups published warnings. The financial press began asking the pointed question: if the only way to maintain low prices is to allow low standards, is this actually a scalable business? Or just an arbitrage scheme that would eventually self-destruct? Huang's response was counterintuitive. He didn't try to fix the perception by chasing premium brands. He didn't rebrand or move up market. Instead, he went deeper into the supply chain. His internal argument was that the problem wasn't that goods were cheap. The problem was that cheap and trustworthy were assumed to be mutually exclusive. His bet was that data could break that assumption. If you gave factories real-time demand signals, if you built manufacturer vetting systems, created accountability structures, tied merchant ratings to continued platform access, you could produce goods that were cheap and reliably functional, not luxury, not branded, just consistently adequate. It was a sideways bet in an industry building upward. By 2021, there were signs it was working. Pinduoduo reported 882 million annual active buyers, more active users than the entire population of Europe. The quality problem hadn't been solved. It had been outrun by scale, and the company's founder was already thinking about a test far larger than anything he had attempted in China. What nobody understood about Temu, not the trade press, not the analysts, not Amazon's executive team, was that it wasn't a discount store. It was a different kind of machine entirely. Traditional e-commerce follows a predictable chain. A factory in Guangdong makes a product. A wholesaler buys in bulk. An importer pays US tariffs and clears customs. A distributor moves goods to a warehouse. A retailer adds a margin. And you, the consumer, pay for every link in that chain. Temu was built to eliminate most of those links. Its consumer-to-manufacturer model, C2M, connected buyers directly to tens of thousands of Chinese factories and suppliers. Temu managed the listing, the pricing, the logistics, and the customer service. Factories received demand signals in real time and produced to actual orders rather than to predictions made months before. The result? A product that cost $3 to manufacture in Guangdong could reach an American doorstep for $7, with free shipping, while a comparable item at Walmart couldn't be sourced for under $12. But the machine needed a fuel source, and that source had nothing to do with China. Section 321 of the Tariff Act of 1930, the de minimis exemption, originally designed to spare international travelers the inconvenience of declaring small souvenirs. In 2016, the U.S. quietly raised the threshold from $200 to $800. Any shipment to an individual U.S. consumer valued at less than $800 entered the country duty-free. No tariff, minimal inspection, no formal customs entry required. Temu didn't create that provision, but Temu was built, from the architecture up, to run on it. In 2024 alone, that single provision allowed 1.36 billion packages to enter the United States without paying a cent in import duty. And then, in the spring of 2021, Colin Huang made the decision that would set all of this in motion. On September 2, 2022, a website called Temu.com went live in the United States. There was no announcement, no press event, no founder keynote. The Wall Street Journal ran a brief item. China's Pinduoduo had quietly launched a US e-commerce site called Temu. That was essentially the entirety of the launch coverage. Within weeks, Temu was the most downloaded app in the United States. By February 2023, 5 months after launch, it ran its first Super Bowl commercial. The spot cost roughly $7 million for a single 30-second unit. It was cheerful, almost absurdly simple. Shop like a billionaire. 12 months later, Temu returned, this time with 6 ads, 3 during the Super Bowl, 3 immediately after, plus $15 million in coupon giveaways distributed to consumers in real time. Conservative estimates put the total Super Bowl package at somewhere between $30 and $50 million. For the full year 2023, the company spent an estimated $1.7 billion on advertising globally. Goldman Sachs estimated that $1.2 billion of that went to Meta alone, Facebook, Instagram, and their connected advertising networks. JP Morgan projected the total would approach $3 billion in 2024. By that year, Temu was operating in approximately 50 countries, launched September 2022, 50 countries before the end of 2024. PDD Holdings reported full-year 2024 revenues of RMB 393.8 billion, roughly $54 billion, up 59% from the year before. Net income of RMB 112.4 billion. The jingle was playing in 50 countries. The packages were landing on American porches by the billion. And almost nobody had yet asked the obvious question: what exactly is this thing built on? To find the answer, go back 18 months before Temu launched, March 2021. In October 2020, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, the most famous technology entrepreneur in Chinese history, had given a speech at a financial conference in Shanghai. He criticized the Chinese state banking system, called regulators backwards, compared the global financial system to a pawn shop. Within days, Beijing halted the IPO of Ant Group, Ma's fintech company, just 48 hours before its scheduled listing. It would have been one of the largest IPOs in history. Instead, it was stopped by a phone call. By early 2021, Jack Ma had disappeared from public view. He resurfaced briefly in January, a short video call with school teachers, and then was gone again. The message was unmistakable. On March 17, 2021, in that exact window, while the world was processing what had happened to Jack Ma, Colin Huang issued a quiet press release. He was stepping down as chairman of Pinduoduo. He would entrust the voting rights of his shares to the board. He wanted to pursue, he wrote, new long-term opportunities in food, life sciences, and basic research. He was 41 years old. His net worth had reached $35.6 billion the previous year, briefly making him China's third richest person. His stake in the company was one of the largest private holdings in the country, and he was walking away. Western observers read it as caution, a rational precaution. Another Chinese billionaire quietly reducing his public profile to avoid the fate that had befallen Ma. But there is another reading. Huang had always been unusually private. In years of building one of China's fastest-growing companies, he had given almost no public interviews. He had let the product speak. What the departure actually freed him to do, away from scrutiny, away from the regulatory exposure that was destroying Ma, was design. The project that would become Temu was already in development, not a rebrand of Pinduoduo, a separate platform built for Western consumers with a different architecture, a different supply chain model, and critically, no name recognition at all. It would carry none of Pinduoduo's baggage. It would carry no reputation whatsoever. While the world watched one founder fall, the other was becoming invisible on purpose. The invisibility was the strategy. And 18 months later, on a quiet Thursday in early September 2022, Temu.com went live. No founder quoted, no named executive, just a website, an app, and 100,000 factories ready to receive their first American orders. What followed took 3 years to fully account for. By 2024, U.S. Customs and Border Protection was processing a number that had been impossible to imagine when the de minimis rule was last updated. 1.36 billion packages in a single calendar year entered the United States from China without paying $1 in import duty, each one valued under $800, each one clearing the border under the same provision a traveler uses to bring home a bottle of wine. The volume was not accidental, it was architecture. PDD Holdings for fiscal year 2024 reported revenues of RMB 393.8 billion, approximately $54 billion. Net income of RMB 112.4 billion. These were not the economics of a discount store. They were the economics of a company that had turned a 100-year-old trade provision into the infrastructure layer of a global business. And here is where the story gets uncomfortable. While Temu processed 1.36 billion duty-free packages, American retailers, Target, Walmart, Amazon, were importing goods the conventional way, paying standard U.S. tariffs, clearing customs through formal entry processes, warehousing inventory at their own cost and risk. Amazon spent more than $80 billion on shipping and fulfillment in a single recent year. Temu spent $1.7 billion, not on logistics, not on tariffs, on advertising. The rules didn't apply equally, not because Temu violated them, but because the rules were written in 1930, updated in 2015, and never designed for what eventually arrived through the border. In September 2024, the Biden administration proposed tightening de minimis, naming Shein and Temu explicitly as the motivation. In February 2025, President Trump signed executive orders eliminating the exemption for China. In May 2025, Chinese and Hong Kong shipments formally lost their de minimis status. In August 2025, the suspension extended to every country. Temu and Shein warned of price increases. International postal services paused U.S.-bound shipments to absorb the new rules. The machine that had moved 1.36 billion packages was forced to adapt overnight. The question now on every analyst's desk: does the model survive when it has to pay its way in? The factories are still running in Guangdong. The app is still downloaded in 50 countries. But every package now carries the weight it was always supposed to carry. We are in the middle of finding out what that means. It's tempting to read this as a story about a loophole closing. A company that found a clever arbitrage in the plumbing of global trade, rode it as far as it could go, and is now facing the inevitable reckoning. That reading is too easy. What actually happened here is that an engineer who had worked at Google, by way of a rural market startup, by way of a $1.6 billion IPO, looked at 100 years of global trade infrastructure and asked a question nobody had asked out loud. What if none of this was necessary? What if a factory in Guangdong could reach a consumer in Cleveland with no brand, no distributor, no importer, no wholesaler, no retail markup, and the entire chain compressed to a $7 checkout and a parcel on your porch? For the years when the rules allowed it, the answer was emphatically yes. And now that the rules have changed, the real question isn't about Temu at all. It's about what else is compressible. What other distances between a producer and a consumer are still being maintained right now? Not because they add genuine value, but because they've always been there. Because the rules were written before the machine existed. The packages piled up in 100 million American homes. The supply chain runs on in Guangdong. And the man who designed the machine, if he's thinking about anything, is probably not thinking about $7 garden tools. He's thinking about what comes next. And that is the thing nobody sees coming.